Eurovision is not political, right?
Israel!
Ceasefire now!
Now it's time for Sweden. This hurricane.
Eden Golan has been singing competitively since she was a little girl.
We're going to Eurovision!
Now, having won a place to represent Israel at Eurovision, she's been thrust to the centre of a storm of protests and outrage over Israel's conduct in its pursuit of Hamas in Gaza since October 7th, killing thousands of civilians and leaving millions more on the brink of starvation. Over the last 6 months, Israel's killed more than 30,000 people in response to the Hamas attack on October 7th that left 1,200 people dead. Still only 20 years old, she's days away from one of the most divisive appearances in the history of the world's most watched singing competition. With the United Nations and humanitarian aid charities demanding an immediate ceasefire, Eurovision's organisers have resisted growing pressure to exclude Israel from participating, insisting it's non-political. So who is the young woman at the centre of this row? And how has an annual singing event that celebrates diversity and inclusion become a lightning rod for the conflict in the Middle East and the concerns about Islamophobia and anti-Semitism?
I was shocked and surprised to hear that they want to disqualify us.
Eden Golan very nearly lost her place at the contest when the song her team submitted was deemed to be too political. The title was October Rain, and Eurovision's organisers, the European Broadcasting Union, had a problem. At this point, Israel had killed an estimated 27,000 people in its bombing campaign. The blockade of food and basic necessities was causing starvation in Gaza, where Hamas militants were still holding more than 100 hostages. Israel was also defending itself against allegations of genocide and ethnic cleansing at the International Court of Justice. While Eurovision's organisers examined the words to make sure they were non-political, Israel's national broadcaster Kan TV threatened to withdraw from the competition altogether if the song wasn't allowed to appear unchanged. Eurovision disqualified Russia and Belarus in 2022 over the invasion of Ukraine. Campaigners have argued for the same treatment of Israel, but the organisers have defended Israel's right to compete, saying the two situations are completely different. Israel's President Isaac Herzog intervened and Kan agreed to rewrite the song, which is now called Hurricane.
This hurricane.
The title, October Rain, became Hurricane, and the song was changed so that all references to October 7th were removed. The line, "Writers of history, stand with me," became "Writer of my symphony, play with me." Where she would have sung "Hours and Hours and Flowers, life is no game for the cowards," she will now sing "Hours and Hours in Powers, life is no game but it's ours." In the chorus, the line, "And I promise you that never again," which could be seen as a reference to the Holocaust, was changed to "Baby, promise me you'll hold me again." Golan faced a difficult reception even before she won the competition Rising Star on Kan TV to become Israel's Eurovision contestant. The young singer said she faced criticism from some fans online for not being Israeli enough due to her slight Russian accent when she speaks Hebrew. Born in Tel Aviv, she moved to Russia aged 6 and has been performing in televised singing contests since she was a child. She even appeared as a guest at the finals of Russia's New Wave Junior, which were held in Crimea in 2017, 3 years after Russia invaded and annexed the region from Ukraine. She moved back to Israel in 2022 when Russia declared war on Ukraine. While Eden Golan has spoken in interviews about the impact of the October 7th terror attack and her compassion for Israeli soldiers and the hostages that remain in Gaza, she's never commented on Palestine or the civilian deaths in Gaza. Her father, on the other hand, has been pretty open about his political views. In a series of social media posts seen by the news movement, Eddie Golan appears to describe European Muslims as barbarians and uses a popular slogan to warn the West is next, as he suggests Islam is taking over Europe. In the weeks after the October 7th murders that rocked Israeli society, the father of Israel's young Eurovision contestant repeatedly shared tropes to his Facebook account that experts say are clearly Islamophobic and are now widespread in Israeli society. One video he shared shows the death and destruction in Gaza and says, "You mess with the wrong country," promising to take revenge.
it's something that brings people together to celebrate music, and art is a form of celebrating diversity. And his daughter is going to join this contest, but nevertheless, he's perpetuating quite prejudicial, hateful, and vile views. So it might be that actually the daughter is not even aligned with these views, or even does not know that maybe her father is perpetuating such views. We would hope so, to say the least, because absolutely she's one joining a contest that celebrates Eurovision, celebrates diversity, celebrates inclusion. Yes, October 7th has set a precedent, and the atrocities and attacks on that day are horrific, and the hostages not being released is absolutely horrific. But I think at the same time, one of the things that we're always missing recently is being empathetic to each other, and equally understanding that other communities are also going through grief.
Israeli media coverage of Malmo, where Eurovision is being held this year, has focused on concerns over anti-war protests and experiences of anti-Semitism reported by Jewish residents. There's a large Muslim population in the city, many of whom are Palestinian.
Free, free! Free, free!
Protests calling for a boycott of Eurovision have already begun on the ground in Sweden and elsewhere, targeting national broadcasters, including the BBC.
So I stand with anyone doing the boycott.
Ireland's entry, Bambi Thug, is one of 9 Eurovision contestants who released a statement saying they felt uncomfortable being silent and that they stand with the oppressed, but stressed that they won't boycott the competition. Among them was the UK's entry, Ollie Alexander, who previously signed an open letter accusing Israel of genocide.
I think if I wasn't in the competition, I would also be boycotting. There are a lot of moving parts, and at the end of the day, without the group of us who is pro-Palestine, it is less competition for the other side to win, and it's less of solidarity there.
Although none of the acts competing have dropped out because of Gaza, as many as 30 artists have cancelled performances at events to be held at the Eurovision Village across the week.
Some of these artists have been very critical of Israel in the past, but they have toned down this criticism. Now, I would imagine it's because they have been told not to politicize the contest more.
Israel's inclusion in Eurovision came about largely by accident. The vast area covered by the European Broadcasting Union to ensure radio frequencies didn't clash was drawn on a map in 1925 and included the British Mandate of Palestine. Israel was founded in 1948 as it fended off an attack by several Arab states. More than 800,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes during the war in an event known as the Catastrophe, or Nakba, by Palestinians today. The new state of Israel joined the contest in 1973.
1, 2, 3, 4, occupation no more.
The last big Eurovision protests over Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories came when the competition was held in Tel Aviv.
So the 2019 contest that was staged in Tel Aviv was also very controversial. There were calls for countries to boycott that edition because it was being staged in Israel, and artists were warned not to make political statements, but political statements were made.
Madonna, who had been criticised for appearing as a guest at the event, left the stage with 2 dancers wearing the Israeli and Palestinian flags.
That was probably not a surprise for the organizers that year, but what was a surprise was when the Icelandic group Hatari, which had made political statements that were critical of Israel in the past, took out a scarf with the Palestinian flag and waved it in the green room.
And we go to France.
Ahead of this year's contest, the actor Helen Mirren and other prominent artists such as Boy George signed an open letter supporting Israel's inclusion.
I don't think artists should ever be discriminated against because of politics. Artists are the ones who often get us through politics. They're usually on the right side of history. Politicians are very often on the wrong side of history.
The last time Eurovision was held in Malmo in 2013, there were complaints of anti-Semitic threats against the Israeli delegation. Now, after online trolling over Palestine and security concerns, Eden Golan heads to the city under heavy guard.
We'll have to see whether she'll even make public appearances. Of course, she'll appear during the contest itself, but very likely she will not be able to leave her hotel or even her hotel room.
With more protests expected and all eyes on Malmo, there are concerns over rising extremism in Israel and abroad.
For the local Jewish community, this is a moment in which they're proud. They're proud of Israel. They're proud of the music. They're proud that Israel is able to lift itself up in these challenging times. Having 133 hostages under Hamas in Gaza today, to be able to come forward to the world and sing proudly, this is who we are. For the Palestinian community, I would say it's quite the opposite. For them, they feel, how could we allow this to happen? Israel is coming represented with, from their perspective, a genocide going on, and having a deep sense of condemnation and injustice that they want to stand for. They cannot hear this as a song.
Eden Golan is a young woman whose whole life has been the build-up to this performance. She's been called to represent her country at its lowest point, still reeling from the deaths on October 7. And still, Israel's unpopular right-wing government continues pursuing Hamas fighters in Gaza in a campaign that shocked the world in its ferocity and devastating human cost. Win or lose for Eden Golan in Malmo, she'll head home to join the Israeli army as part of her mandatory military service, with no end in sight for the war or the occupation of the Palestinian territories.